Welcome to Blackbird Writers Presents. Today, I'm so pleased to be speaking with Donalee Moulton, and I'm just going to read a quick excerpt from her book, Hung Out to Die. Stephen King, Anne Rice, Alfred Hitchcock, and their literary ilk portray psychopaths, also often called sociopaths, as evil, demented, and violent. Yawn. We are indifferent to many human emotions unless they benefit us directly. But for the most of us, and there are a lot of us, we prefer to be left alone, to earn our way, enjoy our own company, and embrace anything but the human condition. We're pretty good at letting you think that we're one of you when we're nothing like you at all. When the shit hits the fan or someone throws a rope over a beam and dangles at the end of it, the stakes go up, way up. The margin for error increases significantly. I can get through most days with relative ease. I've learned to read faces, voice cues, and body language. I know when I'm on terra firma and about to step into quicksand. Norm's death is undoubtedly a quagmire. I have few reference points and no clear understanding of the process or what steps to take next. I do not appreciate getting hung out to die. So that's an excerpt from Hung Out to Die, which released in March of 2023. I hope it's the first book in a long series. Welcome, Donalee.
Oh, look, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I say this to every author. I loved your characters, but actually really, really loved Riel Brava. Excuse me. I don't know, his dry sense of humor and just the way he saw things so differently. I loved him. I cannot wait for more of Riel Brava.
That's actually very good to hear because, as you've indicated, Riel is not going to come across as a character that we want to cuddle or that reminds us of someone who's warm and fuzzy and helpful and wonderful. So I did wonder if people would find some way to connect with Riel. So I'm immensely glad that you did.
Maybe it's my dry sense of humor that connected because I mean, he didn't really have a sense of humor. He was just stating the way things were for him. But yes, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So you got your start in journalism, and in an interview for Crime Writers of Canada conducted by Bob Harris, you say that you didn't choose your career path. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because there's kind of two inherent issues in there. Did you decide to be a writer? And if you decided to be a writer, could you actually be one and live off it, right? And so I think journalism answered the second question for me, that yes, there was a way to have a career that involved a lot of writing, not necessarily exclusively writing, but a lot of writing. And so then the question became, is that what I wanted to do? And initially I thought, no, it isn't. I want to do other things. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a researcher. I want to get a PhD. And every time I seemed to come back to writing. So I finally said, fine, the universe wins, writing it is.
And your writing is really great.
Yeah.
I can't praise you enough, apparently. So you've written nonfiction writing books. You've also written poetry and short stories. And so what is your favorite?
The most recent for me are the fiction books. So they're the ones that are right now closest and dearest to my heart. They're also the ones that were always going to be, right? So you're busy with life, you're building a career, you're taking on assignments, you're volunteering, you're doing all kinds of things, and it's just not the time to write a book. So it was always, oh, I want to write a book. I really do want to write a novel. And eventually at some point I said, I'm actually tired of listening to myself say this. So either write the darn book or stop talking about writing the book. And so when I did it, of course, you learn a tremendous amount. You also
Mhm.
fall in love with writing all over again. So I'm still in that honeymoon phase, but I think it's going to last for many, many years. That's my hope.
Yeah. Well, I think, and every time you start a new project, you fall in love all over again, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so I just finished the Hung Out to Die. And Riel is a self-described sociopath, or he calls himself a psychopath. Um, and maybe let's talk about the difference.
The research that I did over time, of course, how we use those terms has changed. And at one time, there was a very marked distinction, is my understanding, between the two. Over time, those lines have blurred. Many sources that I turn to still make a distinction, and the distinction tends to be that the sociopath is more impulsive, less likely to hold down a job, perhaps more tendency to violence, whereas the psychopath, when the distinction is made, the psychopath is the individual that gets up every morning, goes off to work, does the job, does it wonderfully, interacts.
Mhm.
People don't notice anything, or if they do, they're a little quiet or they're a little odd, but perfectly fitting in with their environment. The big difference is that they have no empathy, or minimal empathy.
Right. And maybe that's what I enjoyed so much about his character, was that he was quite aware when he did not know what was happening when people are hugging, or if someone touched him, it's like, oh, we're doing that. Um, you know, so if universal forces pull him into the fray, so to speak, when he finds his um, colleague hanging in his office. So let's talk about this story a little bit. How does this come about?
Well, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because um, it is Riel who finds the body of his chief financial officer. So Riel is the CEO of a cannabis corporation. And of course, in Canada, cannabis is legal from coast to coast. So production facilities have sprung up across the country. And Riel, who is an American with aspirations to return to America, he is here, however, CEO of this cannabis corp, and obviously not going to be close to any of his employees, but he's early, he walks in, and there's his chief financial officer hanging. And his first thought, and perhaps the police's first thought, is that this is suicide, right? We quickly discover that it isn't. And I think because of Riel's position in the company, he's going to be the one the police turn to for questions, for access, for information. But also, I think because of his personality, which the lead detective picks up on, he has that detachment. So he becomes a sounding board for Franklin Rains. And that ideally will lead to a friendship such as it can be with Riel in future books, which are not yet written.
Soon to be written.
One hopes, yeah.
Yeah, so he's the CEO of this cannabis, it's Canadian Cannabis Corp,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Um, I love also that he talks to himself and talks to him about himself as if he is going to be president of the United
Yeah.
States someday.
And that was both fun and kind of conscious. So, not having published a novel before and not really having a good sense of markets. My second nonfiction book was published by a US publisher. And I was just amazed at the difference between sales in the US when you did absolutely nothing, and sales in Canada when you bent over backwards to increase, awareness of a book. And so I thought, well, it would be nice to have Riel somehow connected to the US market. So he was born in Santa Barbara. He's been transplanted to Canada because I know Canada. I'm familiar with Canada, and cannabis is legal in Canada. But at some point, he may very well return to the US, and he has aspirations. He has political aspirations, and Riel, he wants to go all the way to the top. And those are not ill-founded. He's married to the daughter of a very prominent senator. He will, in future books, have some political experience. So he is in some ways well positioned. He's still relatively young, so he's well positioned to move into that if that's what the characters dictate kind of moving forward.
Right. And we should mention that you live in Nova Scotia, and you said you're a transplant as well.
I am a 100% East Coaster, born and bred in Nova Scotia, been here all my life, right? Which was one of the factors when I was writing the book. I thought so many other things I'm not going to know, so many other things about the process of writing and the arc and all of those things I'm not going to be necessarily comfortable with. But positioning someone in this community, I'm very comfortable with. I don't have to think about that. So it removed one more hurdle.
Yeah. What was your inspiration for him?
That is an excellent question, because if you ask people who know me, what kind of book would Donalee write? The main character would not be male. The main character would not have swagger. The main character would not be ambitious and successful. And, in some ways, he's very predictable and almost a carbon cutout. But I'm a big bath person with bubbles and candles and aromatherapy. And I was in the tub one night giving myself the Donalee, either write the book or stop going on about it. And somehow I thought, well, you have to have a character that people can connect with, but isn't tried and true, right? And somehow Riel emerged. And when I got out of the tub, dripping, I wrote down some notes about him. And so when I set myself a goal to begin the book, Riel was the character that had already been formed. He was only half formed, but he was there. And I seemed to gravitate towards him.
Yeah, I write that way too. I know my characters almost before I know what the whole story is. It's like I form a friendship with this imaginary person before I even know what the story is going to be, and then I let them tell me.
I was surprised at that. I've heard many writers tell me that, oh, they were surprised when the character did X. And I would think, how can you be surprised when the character did that? It's your character. You're making it up, right? The character does whatever you want them to do. But all of a sudden, there are characters in this book that take on a far greater role than I ever thought they would. Riel does things that I just look at and think, now, where did that come from? But it seems to fit. So to your point, it feels right. And so I'm not going to mess with it if it feels right.
Exactly. I was wondering too, would you classify this book as a cozy mystery? Now they're saying that cozies are leaning to the little bit darker side.
It's a great question, and I don't know that I know the answer, because I don't know that I understand all of the differences between the subgenres. So I understand kind of horror, and I understand thriller, and I understand. So it's a cozy in the sense that there is no blood and guts and violence. It is an amateur detective in the sense that this is not a law enforcement person, but it's not a cozy in the sense that it's a small community with a well-loved member of that community who just has this aptitude for solving crime. And so I've always thought of it as a traditional mystery.
Yeah.
But I'm not 100% sure what the differences are between the two.
Right. And I think I can classify it both ways as well, as traditional or cozy. And then I was thinking about all of the coffee drinks that they drink in this book. And I was like, wow, you must know an awful lot about coffee.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I don't drink coffee. I have one decaf coffee in the morning, and I don't particularly care what brand it is or whether it's dark, medium, or light, as long as it's decaf. But there was a scene in the book where Riel was making himself a coffee, and I thought, well, that's creative, isn't it? He's making himself a coffee, like 20 million other people make themselves a coffee. So I thought, well, let's make him have a penchant for coffee. So he had this very nice little coffee. And I thought, well, that worked well. But then, of course, the next time he goes to have coffee with someone, he can't just have a regular coffee. So all of a sudden, I'm immersed in the world of coffee, right? Which is brand new to me. And but it is one of the things that people pick up on, the coffee in particular and the donairs. Riel eats his first donair in the book. And for people on the East Coast, and I understand, at least in Alberta, if not the prairies, donairs are big as well.
I'd never heard of that, but I'm not really familiar with a lot of like traditional Canadian foods. So
I've never had one. It's a huge, giant spit of meat that's roasted. And when you walk into a donair shop, you see this spit, and they slice the meat off the spit. And I'm not even going to hazard a guess what's in that meat. And here on the East Coast, what we would then do is take that meat and we would put it between soft pita bread, and it's got a special sauce. It always has a special sweet donair sauce. You can buy donair sauce on the shelves here now.
it sounds like the Greek, and I can't think of the name now.
Almost like a Slovakia between pita or something. It
Right.
has that about it. I think it's the sauce that makes it significantly different, and the meat. Now here on the East Coast, we have a lot of competition with Alberta out west. They put lettuce on theirs. We just roll over and just keel, because how can you ever put lettuce on a donair? So it's growing in popularity, right?
That's great. So we talked a little bit about the crime, and that Norm looked like he committed suicide. But they quickly decide that that is not the case. And so did you need to do much research about criminal investigations in your writing?
Yes and no. I think as a freelance journalist, I did a lot of legal writing. Now, crime was not my major area. I was more corporate than crime, but I did a fair bit of crime writing. And I understood where the sources were, where I could access this information. So the research was not particularly difficult or time consuming, because I had that foundation and I knew where to access information. So what I didn't expect would come as neatly as it did. I struggled with, how do I convince people that this is a suicide, is not a suicide, but is a murder? And I've also done a lot of medical writing as a freelance journalist, interestingly enough. And so one of the sites I was on went into great detail about how suicide by hanging looks very different.
The ligature marks.
Yeah, and what will happen to the bones, and depths that I didn't get into, but enough to know that the police would very quickly be able to determine whether this was in fact what it looked like.
Huh. Interesting. So let's get into a little bit about you and your past, because your website states that you are a certified yogi. And also, I'm very interested in writers' other lives.
So, and I'm not a yoga teacher. I'm not certified as a yoga teacher, but I came to yoga. I have done it all on and off all my life, but in the last 10 years, really tried to, this is it. I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to be active. I'm never going to be a jogger, right? I'm not going to go to the gym and sweat and see how many weights I can lift. So yoga was it. And so I'm starting a new series of books, and there's 3 main characters, and they meet in a yoga studio. So again, there's that comfort level. But you're absolutely right. you work in things that you didn't anticipate. One of the things for Riel that he mentions, but we don't see much of, but we might in other books, is he talks about meditation techniques. And that's connected to yoga. You will often do something like that in a yoga class. So there's little bits that filter in to his way of managing his personality trait.
Yeah. What do you do in your free time?
What I would like to do less of in my free time is play games on my phone.
It's
I
so
am,
addictive.
oh man, every time I think I'm just going to play one game, and a half an hour later, I'm still there. Yeah. Um, we are very lucky. We live in a lovely little area in Halifax. I would tell you all of our areas are lovely. But we have a lot of company. We have a big, giant Sunday supper that has anywhere from 12 to 14 people every week. So there's a lot of people that filter in and out. And so we tend to, a lot of it is done over food. We have a regular games night. So there's those kinds of activities that are ways of bringing friends and family together, which is absolutely wonderful. I'm not a gardener. I'm not a sewer. I would like to tell you I'm a bit of a walker, but I would like to be a bit of a walker, but I'm actually less of a walker than I would like to be, kind of thing. Yeah. And other than that, I like to read. And I hate to say it, but that can often be something that's difficult to fit in to a day, right? And it shouldn't be, but
Right.
it can be.
I understand.
Mm,
And as writers, we need to read a lot.
we do.
Yeah. Um, so you said you're thinking about another mystery series?
The interesting, when I wrote Riel, I did it because somehow Riel emerged among the bubbles and the aromatherapy and the flickering candles. There he was. And I thought, for whatever reason, he's going to be the first book, and ideally there will be other books. And I've got some other very basic two-line plots that could immerse Riel, because what I discovered after I wrote the book was there has to be a reason that Riel keeps tripping over crime, right? Because he's not a detective, he's not a judge, he's not a lawyer, he's not a journalist. So why do crimes keep falling in his lap? And I thought, I can see now why people make their main character law enforcement adjacent, because there's a reason that you keep so I thought, okay, I'll take a break from Riel and I'll move into something that sounds and feels more like me. So now I have 3 characters who come together in a yoga studio, and none of them are law enforcement adjacent. So yeah, go figure. Right?
Well, they might meet someone
There
while
was
you're
one
writing.
way. I built in an out for Riel to keep solving crime, and I've built in an out for these people to keep solving crime.
Yeah.
In between, my publisher approached me. She has a fabulous series called Canadian Historical Mysteries. So while they are obviously mysteries, they are founded in fact. She lost her Quebec writer very unexpectedly, and she has one coming out a month for most of the months of 2024. And she asked if I would be willing to do the Quebec story, which is based on an enslaved Black woman in 1734 who was accused of arson. She was accused of burning the lower town of Montreal to the ground. And so I said yes. And I thought, I'm not necessarily a history buff by nature. I haven't really done this before, although I've done a lot of research for work. So I thought, okay, this will be a nice challenge. So that book just came out. It's called Conflagration. It's out a little earlier than anticipated, knock on wood. But it was a wonderful learning experience for me.
Okay, cool. And where can readers find that?
Everything is on Amazon. It's published by BWL Publishing out of Alberta, and it's on their website as well. You can link through it through my website, donaleemoulton.com.
Okay. And where can readers or authors find the Hung Out to Die?
Well, and it's same thing, everything available on Amazon, but then I think almost everything in the world is available on
Right.
Amazon, right? Yeah.
True. And if they're looking for you,
I would go to donaleemoulton.com. Yeah. And that's, as you were pointing out, to my great reluctance, the woman who put my website together for me, who is a friend, she said, you have to write something about yourself. And I wrote something and she said, that's a CV. People want to know you, the person. And so I said, oh, I hate doing that. I just hate doing that. So she nudged me, pushed me. And so there's personal stuff in there, which is where we talk about me being a yogi, where we talk about me kind of diving into mystery. So that's a good place to get to know me and my work.
and it also has some of your lovely poetry.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Donalee. This has been wonderful. And I look forward to your next books.
Thank you so much. It's been delightful to be here. And
All
happy
right.
reading to everyone.
Yes. Thanks.